Hey students, today we're going to learn about how to create this really interesting graffiti effect on a brick wall. Looks something like this. Here's my finished sample. In this particular assignment, we're going to learn how or review how to use layers. We're also going to learn how to use a variety of filters. We're going to use a custom splatter brush and something called a bump map to create this kind of cool looking graffiti effect. Okay, let's get going. The first thing you need to do, first of all, I'm going to shut this one down because I don't need it anymore. First thing you do is download this brick wall background that I have on the website. And once you do that, you open it up here. Just go File, Open it, File, Open, and choose the file from your H drive. And it looks something like this. It's a little too big right now, magnification, so let's bring it down to 50% so we can see the entire thing in our editing window. And we see it's called background. That's fine. And for now, I think we can even lock it. I like to lock layers that I'm not using so I don't accidentally move them or paint on them or otherwise. Okay, what we want to do right away is save this as a GIMP file. Right now it's a JPEG, so I'm going to choose File, Save As, and I'm just going to call it, how about graffiti? I'd like you to put your first name in front of that, but how about graffiti .xcf, okay, and I'm going to save it like that. Okay. Very important that you save your work as GIMP file format, XCF format, so that you can save all your layers. Alright, first thing we're going to do is write our words on the wall. I'm going to demonstrate just with the letters FMS, Fairhaven Middle School. And before I type any letters, I select the text tool here and I want to check my font. So I want to use Ravi semi-expanded, so click in here and find that, R-A-V-I-E, semi-expanded. I choose that particular font. And I'm going to set the size to pretty big. I think I'm going to try about 100. And okay, actually I think I said 200 would work. Good. Alright, I've got that. And the color should just be black. I'm going to click in here and I'm just going to put the F. Okay. And we'll say close to that. Then I'm going to click again and put the M. Okay. And then I'm going to close it and click one more time and put the S. Now, as we can see, every time you make a new letter or create a new text object in GIMP, it makes a new layer for it, and that's quite handy. You want each of these letters to be separate on a separate layer and a separate object. The reason for that is because we want to be able to resize them differently so they aren't exactly all the same size. So I'm going to choose now my scale tool, which looks like this. I'm going to click on, I guess, okay, sure enough, we'll choose the S. And when I click on the scale tool, I get this little window. I want to make sure that this is locked because you don't want to change the proportions, height versus width of the image. So then I can just click somewhere in it and drag it nice and big. Okay, and say scale. And I'm going to choose my M layer and my scale tool. Do the same thing. Again, make sure the proportions lock is set, and that'll be good. And again, choose scale once you're done, and then choose your F layer and click with the scale tool, and then go ahead and just click anywhere in it and drag it. Alright, say scale. Now, they're all scaled, not quite set the way I want them, so choose the move tool, which is looking like this, and then take each object and move it so that it is correctly oriented or aligned with each other the way you want it. You don't want them all lined up perfectly. I want it to look like a little bit of a messy graffiti style. Okay, something like that. Alright, now we're going to make our layer, our background layer, invisible. Okay, now I want to merge my visible layers. So I'll come up here to Image, Menu, and choose Merge Visible Layers. And when I do that, I get this little menu that opens up, this window. And I can choose Expanded as necessary, and then click Merge. Okay, now all my letters are merged onto one layer, as we can see here. I want to rename that layer Word. Okay, so that's got my black words on it. Perfect. Alright, next we're going to add a pink gradient outline to all of this. So the first thing we're going to do is come in here, choose my Word layer, choose my alpha to the selection option down here. Okay, and when I do that, I get a selection line all around the actually it's selecting the alpha, which is the transparency. It's selecting around everything that's not transparent, and I want to grow that selection by 20 pixels. So up here in the select menu I say select grow, and I type in 20. Okay, 20 pixels. We can see now my selection line is 20 pixels away from the letters. And now I want to create a new layer up here. So I'm going to click New Layer. And the New Layer window, I want to call it my Pink Gradient Outline. And it should be transparent background. Alright, and now I'm on that layer. Make sure you have that layer selected. And then you can also click and drag that layer below the word layer. Okay. If that doesn't work, you can use the down menu here. That'll move it down one. Now I've got that pink gradient layer selected. Okay, and now we want to go ahead and choose the blend tool. This is the blend tool, also called the gradient tool. And we're going to create a gradient that's lighter at the top and darker at the bottom, and I want it to be a pink color. So the way we do that is to select our two colors for the gradient. Alright, now I want to choose gradient colors. I've chosen my gradient tool. I want to get a gradient that goes from a light pink to a dark pink at the bottom. And so let's click on the foreground color, move this over. I choose in the pink area here, and I choose kind of a light pink right about here, say OK. And now I need to come down and choose the background color, which right now is white. And so I'll select that same pink that I had, select the pink that I had previously, but then just make it a little darker by clicking up in here, say OK. Right now you can see over here I have a light pink to dark pink gradient. With that gradient tool, then I just, making sure I'm on the pink gradient outline layer, I just click from the top down to the bottom of that entire selection area, and we can see now that it fills it with gradient. It's lighter pink at the top, darker at the bottom. That's perfect. Okay. Alright, now that I've got that gradient fill, I want to select or deselect everything, so I go select none, get rid of the little dotted lines. Alright, now that I have that pink gradient, I want to add a slight bevel effect to it. So I come up here under filters and come down to decor, and I'll find the add bevel option. Go ahead and choose that. Small window will open. Okay, if you don't see it, it might be behind another window. And now we want to add a bevel, and I want to deselect these two options that say work on copy and keep bump layer. Make sure those are not selected, and just choose a slight bevel. I'm going to choose about 7 as my thickness and say OK. And we watch what happens here real quick. You can see a slight edge has now been applied to that entire pink gradient outline layer. Make sure you have that layer selected when you apply the bevel, not the black layer. And that looks just great. Now we're going to do the same thing with another layer. This other layer is going to be more of a green color. It's going to be behind the pink, in front of the pink color. Okay, so it's going to be slightly smaller so we can see it. So we're going to repeat these steps. Go back to the word layer, right click on it, and say alpha to selection. That selects the black layer. Okay. Now we're going to grow our selection a little bit, but we're going to grow it not by 20 this time, but instead probably by about 7 would work. Okay, so about 1/3 of the amount that we used before. And it looks like that. Once again, we need to make a new layer, so click on the new layer button. Instead of pink gradient outline, we're going to call this the green gradient outline layer. It's also transparent background, say OK. Now with that layer selected, we're going to go ahead and fill it with a gradient, but this time a green gradient. So I choose that layer. With the green gradient layer selected, I'm going to choose the gradient tool and now select my two colors. So on the front layer or the foreground layer, I want a green, but kind of a light-ish green, maybe like that, say OK. And the background layer, I want it to be similar to that green, but a darker tone, maybe something like that. Okay, say OK. Now with the gradient tool, again, with the green gradient outline layer selected and my gradient tool, I click from the top down to the bottom of the selection area and it fills it with gradient. I left it in front of the other layers now so you can kind of see what that gradient looks like. However, we want that green gradient layer to be below the black word layer, so I'm going to select it and click the down button here in the layers menu. And now we can see that we have 3 layers, black, then green, then pink. Looks great. Now with the 3 layers selected, I want to choose the green gradient and I want to add that bevel effect again. So similar as before, filters, decor, add bevel. You can leave it to set to 7, which works great. Say OK. I have this at 50%, but if I were to bring it up to 100%, you could see the bevel applied there. Looks great. Once you have all that, go ahead and go select none, deselect everything. So at this point, if I turn my background back on, I've got this really cool FMS logo or whatever on a brick background. However, it doesn't look that realistic because if this were really paint on a brick wall, you would see some of the brick wall texture showing through the letters. And so we're going to do that now, but in order to do that we have to use something called a bump map. Alright, so I'm going to choose my green gradient layer first, and I'm going to go simply up here to Filters and Map, Bump Map. And when I open that up I get a window that looks like this, okay? And I can make sure the preview button here is selected so that I can see what I'm doing. And the first thing you need to do up here at the top is choose which layer you want to use as the bump map layer. And we want to use that background which has the brick on it. And as soon as you choose that, now you can see that the brick effect or brick texture is showing through this green paint layer. And so now I'm going to come down and adjust the depth. Depth is probably set to 3 by default, but I want it more than that. I'm going to come up to about 13 on that and say OK. It doesn't look too different right now because only the green layer was selected. Let's go down and choose the pink gradient outline layer and do the exact same thing. Go to Filters, Map, Bump Map. Now that you set it to 13, it should already be set to 13. That's probably going to be good. Say OK. That's starting to look a lot better. Now on both the pink and green layer I see the brick coming through. That looks cool. Okay, now I want to apply the bump map to the black word layer. However, to do that and to actually see it, we need to change the word layer from this completely black color fill to more of a gradient gray. So I'm going to go ahead back to my gradient tool here and make sure my word layer is selected. Okay, I want to choose the top foreground color to be a light gray. So if I come here about in the center and pull straight down, I'll get a light gray. Say OK. Then choose the background color. Same thing, except for now over in this corner I want to pull down over here and get more of a dark gray and say OK. Alright, so I've got a light gray to dark gray gradient. And what I do now is again, with the word layer, I simply need to actually first select that word. So go alpha to selection again. And now with the gradient tool, just click and drag over it. Okay, so now it's filled with a gradient that's gray. So now when I apply the bump map, I'll actually see the texture on it because it's not solid black. If it were black, I wouldn't see the texture at all. So I've got that selected, and now I can go ahead, make sure I'm still on the word layer, and I can go select none. Okay, come up to Filters, Map, Bump Map. This opens up. Keep my layer level or depth level to 13, say OK. There you go. Now I've got a really nice looking texture, except for I still want my words to be darker than that. So I can take that word layer and I can come up into my color, brightness and contrast, and I can really reduce the brightness a bit until I get this down to be more close to the black color that I really want. So I'll move this over. I can move brightness down way down to about here. I can probably go contrast up a little bit until it looks the way I want it. Say OK. Alright. So now I still have almost black letters, but I can still see that texture coming through. That looks really good. I want to merge the background layers, the green gradient outline and pink, into one layer. And so I can simply choose the top one of those two layers, right click on it, and say merge down. Okay, merge down option there in that menu. Okay, so now the pink and the green are all on one layer.